Hey everybody, Dr. Edel here. So this is my second attempt at a recap video. I did my first recap and it was 22 minutes, and I'm like, oh, I just want a quick video to help you guys remember stuff, not to overwhelm you with brand new material. So I'm going to try to keep this short. Tonight we talked about the syllabus. The big highlights there. Feel free to text or email anytime you have questions. As I mentioned in class, if you send me a text, it won't wake me up at night. I'll just reply in the morning. If you have an assignment due that night and you're not sure about something, definitely send a text. I'd rather you get a quick answer right away than have to wait on a longer email. So with attendance, of course, attendance is very important. Between being in class and the in-class assignments, it's about 30% of the grade. But if you are sick, feel free to use Zoom. We're going to have Zoom as an option all semester. If you attend on Zoom, you get the same attendance participation points as being there in person. But I do encourage you, please try to be in person as, all the time if possible. It's a lot easier to get to know your classmates and take part in the activities when you're there in person. Now you'll notice from the syllabus that there is a lot of writing for my sections of English 101. Bear in mind that I value quantity of writing, and I don't necessarily worry about grammar or spelling or syntax. To me, it's the most important thing is getting those words on the page, getting those ideas down. Now, the kind of the example activity we did to kind of as our icebreaker was the Supervillains of Thanksgiving. And so if you remember that we had some supervillains who were doing like wedgies and sharing videos of social media and velcroing mouths shut and changing the narratives of what those photos actually mean. And the key takeaway from that activity is that every situation you are in, everything we do, communication is involved. And so with English 101, we're going to be talking about, how do we use communication? And then how do we adapt the skills that you already have to apply those to a college classroom? From there, we moved into talking about primary sources. And our focus for this week is understanding how do we differentiate primary sources from every other type of source. The most important thing to remember is that a primary source is directly tied to that topic. All right. And every source out there will have bias. And so something that's important to remember is that even a biased source can still be a primary source. The most important thing is just that the person or the document that you are considering is directly tied to that topic you're researching. So the larger example we used to discuss primary sources tonight was World War II. And the most important sources that came up were the individuals involved. Okay, so veterans, any kind of firsthand accounts they give, civilians who were there who witnessed what was going on, they are also important firsthand accounts. And with those examples, it's important to bear in mind that there will be different perspectives. So Allied veterans versus German veterans would have very different perceptions of D-Day and the war itself. American sailors versus Japanese pilots would have very different perceptions of Pearl Harbor. Now, along with this, we also talked about Holocaust survivors. And one of the things that is very important to remember is that certain topics are going to change who is able to speak. So with the Holocaust, it was, the Holocaust was so devastating and so many people were murdered that we have lost a great deal of the narratives of what people experienced. And so that is something to be mindful of. Slavery is another example where, the lived experiences of people who were enslaved, black Americans of, you know, from before, the 1860s, very few were allowed to read and write. Most of their honest experiences simply weren't allowed to be passed down. And so we are missing a lot of those perspectives. Now, with World War II, you know, other types of, some of the written perspectives that came up, news stories that come directly from the front or any video footage or photographs, those are excellent primary sources. But remember that a news story that was written behind the lines or a news story that was kind of assembled from other firsthand accounts would be a secondary source. Okay. Now, we also talked a bit about diaries, and diaries are an excellent primary source when they're available. Okay. So the Diary of Anne Frank, one of the most well-known primary sources in history. And something important to remember is that although Anne Frank was not there to witness battles, she was not there to, not in a position to even witness, ordinary city life going on around her. Her personal experience being trapped in an attic is valuable information about what the experience of World War II was like during the Holocaust, at a time when many people had to hide in cellars and attics and barns, and many of those narratives have been completely lost, either because diaries weren't kept or they were burned, and those individuals, may have been captured. And another interesting source of diaries that many people aren't familiar with is that German generals at that time frequently kept diaries. And so many of those diaries reveal weaknesses in the German military that weren't common knowledge at the time. Okay, so for example, when Germany invaded Poland in 1939, many German generals were concerned that Britain and France would invade Germany on the Western Front while the German military was in Poland. And they feared that Germany would be crushed. That did not happen. And because it did not happen, many people are unaware that the German army was vulnerable. There's this kind of myth of the German army being like, quote unquote, unstoppable. And the reality is much more complicated than that. And it's important that we look for different perspectives rather than simply depending on, our prior knowledge. Now, along with that, documents came up as a very important type of source, especially when we're talking about the Holocaust, for example. As I mentioned, 11 million people were murdered, and we don't have their stories. We have some of the stories because of those who survived. But to get a full scope of the Holocaust, you may want to look at railway records from, the German train system. That can tell you, how many people were being shipped from one location to another. There were actually, there were issues where, the Holocaust was competing, the process of genocide was taking place on such an unbelievably massive scale that no one person knew the full scale. And so you need those documents to piece together the entire story. So with that, I'm just going to kind of wrap up here. That's kind of our 10-minute recap of tonight's class. I want to emphasize before, please feel free to email or text anytime with questions or clarifications. As I mentioned before, my office hours will be 5 to 6 p.m., so before class time. And but if you need to schedule another time to meet, feel free to text and we can find out a good time to meet over the phone or over Zoom or anything like that. So with that, I will. Oh, and a quick reminder about your assignments. So remember that you have your exit ticket for tonight. Basically, just a quick summary of what you remember from class, any questions you have about what we covered. Hopefully, this video provided a good reminder. The next thing is that you have your online worksheet that covers primary sources. I want to emphasize the worksheet has no time limits. It's open book. The most important thing is that you understand a primary source by the end. I'm not too worried about whether or not you're skilled with a multiple choice test or something like that. But one quick reminder is that the worksheet will take the average of your scores. So I encourage you to choose the best answers you can each time, because if your first attempt doesn't go so well, it will be harder to bring up your score in future attempts. The third and final assignment you have for next week is just a quick write-up. I believe it's about 500 words describing some of your past writing experiences, positive or negative, experiences writing for class, experiences writing on Facebook, or if you make YouTube videos, you could talk about those as because they are a form of communication. And so with that, again, if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you all next week.